All righty, we are going to be moving on to our next panel about family offices, intergenerational wealth transfer, and tax issues. It's going to be discussing the latest developments and trends in family offices, including intergenerational wealth transfer and tax issues, as I've said. Our panelists are Wendy Kraft, Chief of Staff at Fulcrum Equities, LLC. We've heard from Cynthia French Blanchard, President of Anthem Vaults Incorporated, Anthem Gold Incorporated, and Hercules SEZC. She's going to be joining us again. Cindy Britton, International Private Client Tax Partner at Catton Mushin Rosenman LLP, and Brian DeLucia, Managing Partner of Arrivato LLC. Please welcome them to the stage.
Good afternoon.
Are we on?
Oh, hello. Good afternoon. I would like to introduce you to our intergenerational wealth transfer panel and tax issues. Not going to talk about taxes for a whole hour. Don't worry. We're also going to talk about, I know I'm a tax attorney too. I'm with you. I just don't think they'd be that excited. But we're also going to talk about how you transfer down wealth and some of the family office dynamics in the family office space, which are a little unique. But I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves first. Cindy, would you like to go ahead?
Hi, is it on?
Is she on?
Hi.
Use this one.
Oh, hi, I'm Cindy Britton, and I'm a partner at Catton Mushin Rosenman, and I am a private client tax attorney and deal specifically with clients who are family office oriented and who have global operations.
And I'm Cynthia Blanchard. I am part of family office, the Blanchard family, and I also help run our companies with my husband, Anthem Blanchard.
Hello, my name is Brian DeLucia. I'm a managing partner at Arrivato, which is a family office that's mostly real estate development centric.
And really briefly, and I don't usually do this as a moderator, but so you understand, I do work for the Swig family of the Fairmont Hotel chain heirs. I report to Kent Swig. He, while he owns his own businesses apart from the cousins, he also owns a share with the Zeckendorfs of Halstead, Brown-Harris, Stevens. Most of you in real estate recognize those names. He also bought Hemsley Spear from the Schneider family after Harry Hemsley passed, and has a couple other ventures. And his children, who are in the fourth gen, which Anthem and Cynthia know, manage the crypto portfolio for the family. And Hemsley Spear has been put on the blockchain, which is kind of cool. So I think we're all well qualified to talk about that. Now, Cindy, I'm going to pick on you first. In the last 2 years, and we're not going political here, but in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of movement for a variety of reasons amongst the family offices for getting dual passports, for relocating part of their assets and part of their software. That really wasn't me. It wasn't lunch, I promise. Something's going on back there. Locating part of their portfolios offshore, right? And I know that you deal with a lot of cross-border issues, and while that was kind of a quiet thing amongst the billionaire families prior to maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it's become a really big thing. And then Trump came in and changed our tax code. So, you know, before we were like, put that in a trust, and now we're like, hold it till you die. So a lot of things have changed in a couple of years. And what kind of issues are you seeing from the families that are coming to you?
Well, that's a big question, and
Really
we
big.
could speak all day on several different layers. I would say from the let's just take it kind of granular from the first part, is that if we're in California, we're of course subject to U.S. California tax. So a lot of my clients who may have California assets or the family's California based, they really do want to mitigate from the California tax perspective. So in terms of going foreign, we do a lot of trusts in Nevada, Delaware, South Dakota, and Wyoming. And those are fantastic jurisdictions for a lot of different reasons. Number one, with proper planning, you can avoid California state income tax for some amount of time until a California beneficiary actually gets a distribution. But also these states are doing, we're seeing a trend with many of our families that they're setting up not only trust, but their own private trust company. So I deal a lot with PTCs and am on the board of private trust companies. And that's a very special animal.
Let me break in here just because of some things that we've been seeing in the family office field. And I know Brian and I have talked about this. It used to all be the Dakotas for the private trust companies. But my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that Tennessee's jumping into that game in a really big way. At least that's what I heard from a few people, that the governor is very attuned to the families, is happy to change some laws around so that people come to Tennessee.
Tennessee
not the Dakotas.
is doing some amazing things. They really want to be at the forefront. And I think you're going to see Tennessee as a big player because they're trying to be as aggressive as possible in terms of their own tax code and trying to bring in and make it very, one of the things that states have to look at, and I know this is very granular, but the question's granular, is insurance. Is insurance. And when we buy insurance, we pay a tax. We don't know that, but we pay a premium tax in California. And depending on where you buy your premium, pay your premium, if it's in one of these favorable jurisdictions, you may not have that tax. And you would be surprised how that tax drag on the investments in an insurance policy can really create, you can lose. So Tennessee and many other, but as goes...
Are we boring you?
Yeah.
It's a tax conversation.
As goes, yeah. As goes Tennessee, the other states will comply.
Very good. Now, Brian and Cynthia, you waiting for that tax question? Are you scared? I'm not going to do it to you. I'm kind. Cindy's going to cover you. So a lot of times, and I'm going to pick on real estate because real estate's one of the places we see it the most. We start talking about intergenerational transfer. A lot of times, especially with our first gens, what we see is they don't want to transfer. They want to die in the chair, right? And Gala had the best response to me. We were having one of these kind of panels, and I said, your son's 12. Have you started thinking about how you're going to do a wealth transfer? And he goes, Wendy, I look in the rear view mirror we're driving, and I don't know if I'm going to let him drive my car, let alone handle my empire. And there's that feeling that the younger generation just can't be you, so why would you turn it over to them? And sometimes we call it the Prince Charles syndrome, like, yeah, next year I'll turn it over. So, and you both are in different situations, but Cynthia first, how do you come to the concept of, like, maybe I'm not transferring it down to another generation, but maybe I'm transferring it to nieces, to nephews, to charities, and when do I do that? When am I comfortable doing that?
Well, I think my husband and I don't have children. I think what Dr. Crow said, we have company children, and we also
Lots of
have
them.
furry children, but they're pretty easy to deal with. One of the things we've done is actually hire a lot of our nieces and nephews and have them become part of our company and earn equity as well as salaries and help them have the foundation of ownership, and it's worked out incredibly well. And I think that's a great idea, even, for families where their children might have a trust that they may receive at 25, 30, 35, but that doesn't necessarily give the foundation of ownership and responsibility.
Let me cut in there, and Cindy, you're welcome to jump in because I know you've seen this. So we see a lot of families doing that, and Brian, jump in as well. But one of the questions becomes then, is our family office becoming incestuous? Not in a dirty way, but incestuous because we don't have new ideas coming in, and a lot of the families now have this feudal kind of thing where you have to go work for another family office for 5 years before you can come work for yours, or you have to earn your right to work in the family office, because we always want a new influx of ideas, not people just reflecting back. So all of you, go ahead, jump on that.
Well, no, I think it's a great, obviously you bring up a very, very good point. And, I guess you want to get in maybe governance a little bit within a family. And that's very, very important. I know what you're referencing to. I mean, we have a mutual friend whose family does that. I know with their children, has them ultimately get hired by other companies, and developing a very diverse set of skills and ideas and concepts. And I think it is important to get out there, especially with your children, get them exposed to, how other families are doing things, how other businesses are doing things, even picking up different industries. Because one of them, I think, most important things, especially looking at next generation, is the children have maybe other passions or interests. And I think as a family, you have to utilize your whole ecosystem and framework and resources to, support your next gen, but, most importantly, from a framework of emotional intelligence, but then utilizing all your resources to get them, exposure and experiences, within, those areas where their passions are, and then ultimately, looking at maybe some of your existing industry or industries that you're involved in, and, well in advance make a decision, are we eventually going to exit this industry, or are we going to, do some type of exit, in the future, and then, ultimately that's going to provide resources to the next gen.
Well, let me jump on that, because that's kind of where Cindy comes in. How do you, because I know what family offices are like. I can only imagine what you see. But how do you deal with them when they come into you and they're asking for your best advice, and you're giving them your best advice, and they're not hearing it?
Well, I'll tell you a kind of a best practice process that after doing this so many times, what I see works, and it's kind of a bit by bit, where you have to draw them into the understanding that this is going to work, kind of a trust me. But when first gen comes to me, and it might be that it's second gen gen has grown it, you have to kind of figure out where the genesis is of success, and then that family member will come to you. And then going through what you just mentioned, keep or sell. If they're going to keep it and they believe that this is a great industry to be in, then how old are the children? What is the second gen or third gen? Where are they in this hierarchy? And I can tell you the best way of designing a legacy, because as most of you may or may not know this, but the number one risk to family wealth is the family itself. With the number of disputes that we have tried to, to keep from imploding the family, imploding the wealth. Taxation, while I live in the world of taxation, that's not what drives the structure. The structure is really the dynamic of the family. But what we do is we want to get the children in as fast as possible into a philanthropic board. Because if everybody feels good when they're giving away money, especially little kids when they're giving it to puppies, and they're giving it to, the Humane Society, and you say, well, you have to research the Humane Society. Is this one really good? We want to give to, my daughter, I want to buy a goat in Africa. And I think that's a great thing to do. But is that, let's do the due diligence on buying those types of things and microfinance. Kids can really feel gratitude, but what they're learning is how to speak in a business sense. And once people are respectful on a philanthropic board where they're feeling good, then you can transfer them over into the family board where their interest is now at stake. And so then you say, hey, why don't we build the rules of the game now that we know how to speak business? And that has worked almost all the time. When it hasn't worked, it's because the industry's failing.
I wholeheartedly agree. Our family just instituted a new thing with the family board because at the 4th gen level, we have too many family members to actually allow them all on the board. So they created a junior position at 16, and those that wish to intern for 2 years then end up on the board to make it fair so that everybody has a chance. And some people show up and then they don't make it on the board. But
you know, I tell you, the harshest thing is when children, adult children, all of a sudden have the responsibility thrust upon them and they're not trained because they just don't know how to live in that space. They haven't been trained in the right communication. And so getting that, just like you say, understanding a board criteria, board qualifications. Do they go and work in a different industry, the same industry? How exactly are they going to structure that board? And I can tell you my board criteria and qualifications are different and my structures are different depending on the culture. Correct. The Chinese board, the American board, the Latin American boards, the people, how they view money, how they view Americans are oftentimes, well, I kind of want to go my separate way. And where other cultures really do view the wealth as the family wealth. So those are all factors that get put into how to design the legacy of this family.
I think, too, and you both have been with me in Monaco, Dubai, European and Middle East, the family name is the legacy. Not the business, not the wealth, it's the name. And there are consequences if you don't uphold that legacy. But I know you just must see so many different scenarios. I mean, we all do, because we all have friends in family offices and everybody kind of talks. But I think there's been a little movement, too, at least what I've seen, and you guys can jump on it. We used to always say the way you reach the next generation is through philanthropy. And then the millennials kind of, and I'm not ragging on millennials, don't anybody get upset on me, please, kind of moved away from, I want to be on the board of the Red Cross, or they wanted to do something like, I want to be on Charity Water. I want to know that what I'm doing is having immediate impact, not global impact. And then what we saw was this whole crypto thing come in. And I have 5 families I could name to you right now where the children who are in their 20s are doing crypto. And all of a sudden, their parents, to be close to them, have gotten involved. They have no idea what they're doing. And their kids are teaching them, and it's built a bond that we used to see through philanthropy. And we're engaging them in that way where we used to engage them through donor-advised funds. So I think we're in a little bit of a turning point. For the first time, I've been in family office for many years, and it's the first time I've seen the generation underneath kind of rising up as opposed to the generation above reaching down. That's
I was going to add to that because I really think that you're very instrumental in helping bridge that, because when my husband and I got involved through you in the family office community, and that was one of the missions that Anthem had, but you were, actually it was your idea to have classes, how to buy Bitcoin. And,
well, we didn't know. We're old. I didn't know how to download the app.
Well, but it was amazing because these classes, how many were done? I think
they started bringing in their kids.
Yeah, they started bringing their kids. I think at the end of the day, there was over 300 people with their families and some fiduciaries, of course, and their children. Their children would sit there with their parent. And Anthem would kind of walk them through how to just upload,
how to connect to the internet,
so we could download how to get and then Anthem would end up giving them $100 worth of Bitcoin to start that process. And the kids were thrilled because this is their world, and they saw their parents showing an interest in what they're passionate about. And I don't know, you'll have to answer this question, but because of that interest, I would assume that the kids are now saying, okay, well, now let me see how I'm interested in what you're doing too, because there's a give and take. Yeah.
But I'll go back to Cindy and Brian in other ways. do you think, and some parents are just not going to, and that's first gens that made the wealth, they're just not going to involve their children. They're going to keep them in an office, and there's at least 20 of these in New York, where they just make their kids work for them. And they're not going to give them any real decision making. But some parents say, okay, here's, and I don't think it's the best move, but here's, X amount of dollars, go buy a property and see if you can do it. They haven't given them the skills, they're just giving them the money. In other families, we see a lot of different ways of doing it, and I know some of it has tax consequences, some of it doesn't. We saw a lot of sprinkle investing going on about 5 years ago, which should make Cindy cry, where they just put a little here, a little there in all different states and ended up paying more in accounting and taxes than they made on the projects. So what are some of the best ways that you think to transfer intergenerational wealth, provided they'll do it down to the next gen?
Well, I think, certainly, especially because, we have this very close-knit family office community that we all talk about. I think it's very, very important to, have conversations with our families. I know us being in New York, we're always in different roundtables almost on a weekly basis in small groups with other families, and we find out, who are, some of the maybe top professionals that are a cut above that we could align with and have conversations with, pursuant to, some different strategies to, pass along wealth. Obviously, we're getting to know a new friend here, so I'm sure, there's opportunities where, we'll be able to recommend you, into conversations with families, regarding, some of these strategies. And I think that's one of the things that's, a differentiation, between a high net worth family and an ultra high net worth family is these little 1%ers. And, within our small community, like we said, we all talk. We're able to identify, really, really talented people that have those little niches that I think are, make that difference ultimately at the end of the day, which is a difference between a ordinary wealth transfer professional and elite wealth transfer professional.
For me, and this is going to sound a little bit cliche, and I apologize for that, but when a client comes in and they're trying to determine their legacy, I have to say that teaching communication amongst the family members is the key.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can't communicate what they want. And often, they all want the same thing. They want the family first. They actually share so many common goals and values, and somehow getting them to learn that they actually have a common thread, that they're closer than they think they are, that they see things that they don't even realize, wow, I think like my dad. Mm-hmm. And that kind of scares some next gen people. But communication is really important. And, I want to say this, and for all of you people out there who do this, it was like one of the women who said, she's sharing it because it's her perspective. So I'm sharing this because it's my perspective, because I grew up in a law firm environment when I started out with ultra high net worth in Santa Barbara, and we all had to take these personality tests to determine how we communicate. And it was interesting because over time I figured out that what happened was I scored high on detail, as most of the women in here will, but I scored equally as high on big picture thinking. But because I got detail, I got all the detailed work, and the men got all the big picture thinking. And I'm like, something wrong with this picture. But that's okay, because eventually pigeonholing a person, like Susie, she's just a flake. Or Bobby, he's so serious. Pigeonholing in a family will truly implode the family. And so I just used the personality test as a Trojan horse because it ultimately affected me to such a great deal that I had to leave the firm because I didn't feel like my big picture thinking was necessarily respected. So there are tools, there are people, there are professionals who don't have to come in and grab the whole family. They can be a plug, a piece to help bridge the family to, because sometimes doing just a very basic estate plan, people get emotionally stuck because they're scared of what, of death. And so sometimes they get stuck and they can't proceed. So you have to bring in a facilitator to get them there. I'm not a psychologist. I don't profess to be. So I have to bring in a person who has that expertise. But then somebody needs to bring me in to help with this framework that builds in the governance and builds in the tax and builds in all those things that the parents want in an efficient manner. But what all of us, and you being here today, what I think we all can bring to the table is the fact that we are open-minded and we're not rigid. We can't be rigid that this is the only way, because if you do that, you can't move. It's kind of like attracts like. If you're a rigid person, you're going to find that rigid Gen 1, and you're going to implode the family. So I would say find those people who are open-minded and really want to move the family forward.
So I'm going to say we do have a psychiatrist in the family office space who comes in just for liquidity events. We have other mental health professionals for that. And what you need to think, you may think, well, this is just so stupid. But look, you have two kids. One child went and was a math professor, and one child went and worked in the business. Do you leave that estate equally to them? And these things will rip people apart, and it's very hard to deal with. What if one child, I hate to say it, went into drugs and the other two kids were model citizens? Do you split the estate 3 ways? If you don't, will they all hate each other? And their death conferences, I've had family members say, you want to have a death conference? And I break them up in 1-hour increments because too much of it, and they can't stand it. There's when you're bringing in a spouse into an iconic family, are they going to have a say on the board? Well, we've watched Harry and Meghan. He wants her on the board. He wants her to have a full say. Some other people are like, no, this happens in regular families. She married in. Cynthia's had that on a smaller scale. Do you get treated as a full family member? And I just want to say one of the unique things that I have seen is that women are becoming, which is why those guys annoyed me so much, but women are starting to head more and more family offices because we have that emotional, that EQ part that is so important to kind of damp down the family drama. And we're seeing a lot of new structures that kind of reflect that, which is what Cindy's talking about.
I have to say that I've never been scared of a spouse. Let's say it's the children of the family wealth. But I've never been scared of having a spouse because your spouses, if they're not there, the evolution of a meeting, whenever you're in a meeting, it takes a tone. And you're thinking about things, you're communicating about things, and you believe you've come up with truly a great structure because of the evolution of the meeting, the psychology of the meeting. And then you get home, and the wife or husband says, well, did you think about this? And then you as a spouse, you feel, oh my God, they hoodooed me. They tricked me. And then it implodes.
Well, let me throw that out there. One of the neat evolutions I've said, and Brian and Cynthia and I have all kind of talked about this, is we used to set them up for failure. Incoming spouse, look, if you happen to divorce, you're getting $5 million. So what have we said? You're going to be put on an allowance, and if you destroy your marriage, you'll get some money. A couple of the families thought this was ludicrous, and this went on for 50 or 60 years. Now what they say, the smarter ones, is join our family, and we're immediately going to give you $5 million in trust for 1 year, and you have to go take an MBA at the family office. They're going to teach you how to invest. This is particularly helpful for families where the incoming spouse is not going to be on the family board or have a full say. In 1 year, they've gotten an MBA. They have $5 million. There's no incentive to divorce, and now they can talk at the dinner table equally with the family member that they've married. Oh, what'd you guys invest in? Oh, that sucks. I made 12%. And it's a whole different dynamic than you're being invited in and you really have to wreck your marriage or have some kids to be entitled to anything. And I think we're coming along.
You know, one of the things in that regard is creating the trust, but in one of my families, they created a charitable remainder trust where they put the money in, the person got an income stream, you know, for life, and then that money would go to a charity. So they got the charitable deduction when they set it up, and the person got an income stream. And so there was, nice. By using the CRT, the charitable, they were able to kind of put them on
their
in
own
the room.
Independent income without having to justify it.
And they got to choose the charity.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So I know Desiree's going to yell at me soon. So Brian, I know you are. We're getting time. So Brian, best thoughts, best practices, intergenerational wealth transfer.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I think it all definitely starts with governance. I think giving the children a voice early on, allowing them to participate in some of these meetings and in terms of asking questions, providing some input, what their thoughts are today, and asking probing questions to the next gen to allow them, to think. And I think also just giving them a say in terms of, what's our mission as a family, certainly today, but what's our mission going to be as a family moving forward, and identifying, what our culture is. So I really truly believe a lot of it comes down to true communication and, just off of what you'd mentioned earlier about the spouses as well. Again, I always believe, the females are always definitely the emotional leaders of the family, and when you're bringing somebody into a family through marriage, setting up something where there is that true education that education that leads to a true sustainable partnership, not only just within the marriage but within the family as a whole. And I think that's something that's really important to create that alignment of interest, between, the family, just the intermarriage, and then also transitioning through the next, generation as well. Because I know we've been exposed to some of these situations where, that there's been, wealth transfer, but there's been a dispute between the children and, and the, and maybe in some cases a second, through a second marriage. So, and I know we have some friends that have, I guess, been victims to that. So that's why I was a little long-winded on my response, but there was kind of a reason for tying this all together.
Cynthia?
Well, yeah, it can get quite complicated. I feel very fortunate that my situation with my husband and my husband's family is not super complicated, and it's very, very love-based. And I watched a sizable estate that took 10 years to settle after Anthem's father's death be led by love, which that was beautiful to watch, because I'd married into the family by that time, and they cared about each other more than they cared about the money. So I feel very fortunate that that's been my experience.
You really are.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, in answering your question, I think what we were talking about earlier, I think the communication is imperative, obviously. I think that what we have seen with what we've tried to do in the family office environment of helping the older generations try to understand the younger generation's passions and the younger generation's motivations, and that will give them the opportunity to have the open communication from the younger generation to show interest in what they're doing, and kind of a merging of spirits is my suggestion.
Cindy?
I would say to really try to find like-minded advisors, open-minded advisors who aren't rigid and who understand that there's no one-size-fits-all, and that let the family lead. let the family have their say and listen. Just really listen to what they have to say and be able to be nimble enough to, to have the right advisors who can plan around that. Also, consider philanthropy as a tool. And I'm sure both of you know that being exposed to groups where families actually, who are in these family office type situations, it's just so helpful to hear what they have to say. So if a family, when they come to me, if I can get them, going to a seminar where family office ideas are there, it doesn't threaten me. The more, there's enough love. There's enough love for everybody.
I'm going to take one question, and then I promise I'll yield the stage. Does anybody have a question of these great panelists? Go ahead.
My question is more related to the fact that as you kind of talk about this, and we talk about most of people that are going to be served, they're not going to be people that have high net worth. But I think what you're saying, and I took away, is that everyone needs to have this discussion regardless of what the asset is that you have. Because I can tell you, within the population that I work most frequently with, which is that middle income to that low to moderate income individual, they all typically, especially if they're homeowners, have an asset to transfer. They have things that are transferable. And if they have a number of children or second marriages and things of that sort, that discussion is equally important. I think oftentimes it's missed as a discussion. So if any of you could kind of talk about how you work with individuals that may not believe that they should be having that conversation with you because they don't believe they have enough.
I think that's a really good point, because just between my daughters, one of them says, "You always buy Ashley a new hairbrush every time she loses it, and I've saved mine. Where's my money? Where's my, my equity? Because I've never lost my hairbrush." And I'm like, really? This is, so it can, you are so right. And I think for me, when we're having, my practice is obvious, ultra high net worth, but your point is really, really sound. And I think it comes down to the advisor that you choose. So what you should do is, when people are choosing advisors, don't choose the first one you go to. Really interview 2 or 3 and choose the one that speaks to you. And they really do need to think about who communicates the best with the family.
Well said. I want to thank my panelists. This has been a lot of fun. I love you guys. Thank you so much.
You're
Love
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.